This week you're going to be studying migration geography. And when geographers look at migration from a geographic perspective, they're thinking about where people come from and move to, what are the forces that put people into motion, and what is the landscape of migration? What a refugee camp looks like. What do ethnic neighborhoods look like? How do people change when they move to a new place, and how do people change the place? So two terms that you'll use are emigration, which is the moving out from a place. So you talk about I'm going to emigrate. And immigrants or immigration is moving into a place. So there's a list of terms on Moodle that I want you to be able to use in your discussion. So when you're looking for an article, you want to be able to use some of these terms in your article and relate that to the readings and to the videos. So the main reason when we look at why people migrate, there's usually two basic categories. One is an economic reason, the other are cultural or environmental factors. And so when we think about that, we talk about the push-pull factors. So pushes are the things that get people moving out of a place, and pull is where you decide to go to. So the push factor is often much stronger than the pull factor. Very few people leave their home, their culture, their family, their language, their way of life just to go have a new experience. Most people migrate because something is pushing them away from the place they know. And then where you decide to go, that would be the pull. So when we look at the economic push-pull factors, usually people leave a place to find a better job. And so currently North Africans are immigrating into Spain and southern France because the economy in North Africa is very poor, and there's a hope that there are jobs in North Africa. The US and Canada are viewed as places where the economy might offer people a better opportunity. So when people leave a place for economic reasons, that may be permanent. They may want to migrate and change residency, or it may be temporary. They may return at some point once the situation changes, and that's what we're looking at right now in 2013, that some people who had moved here for economic benefits have now returned home because the U.S. is not doing as great as it had in the past. The pushes tend to come from hazardous or undesirable places. For example, there had been historically a lot of their internal movement within the United States from snowy Minnesota down to southern Arizona or Florida. So people see cold, dark climates as no longer a good place to be. A lot of relocation after Hurricane Katrina put about several 100,000 people in motion in the United States. Drought will push people off the land. In 2011, a very long drought in Somalia caused people to move, and then also conflict will cause movement. So when we think about the landscape of migration, there's some things, the development that happens in areas. So often one of the terms that you'll run into is chain migration, and this is when a family member moves to a new town in another country and sets up their life, a business, they have supports, and then after a couple years they may bring another family member over and support them and help them get started. So you end up having a leg up or a benefit of moving into a place where you already know somebody. Another landscape of migration is the development of ethnic neighborhoods or concentrations of people who voluntarily choose to live near each other. These are usually seen in urban areas, and you get the development of businesses that support the culture that people came from. You can see cultural foods, medicines, other kinds of shops, the language, and some of the customs are practiced in these small or sometimes large neighborhoods. So Chinatown, Little Italy, Koreatown are large examples of ethnic neighborhoods, but Eugene has some ethnic neighborhoods along the Blair area where there's a lot of immigrants and that have settled there and support each other in that area. Refugees are a special status of immigrant. These are people who are moving because they're forced. Usually there's a fear of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and or discrimination of some kind. I'm going to close that, where your life would be endangered. The UN High Commission on Refugees has a great site that shows what current areas in the world are in motion, talks about supports for these people, about refugee camps. Refugee camps can be places where people live often their whole lives. They'll move on into a refugee camp and they never find a place to take them, and they'll stay in those refugee camps for very long times. Then to think about geography, geographers often find careers in agencies that work with refugees or immigrants in some aspect of resettlement. If you were a geographer working as a city planner, you might be evaluating community supports for immigrant populations. In Portland, there's an office of the International Rescue Committee, the IRC, and the responsibility for that committee is to help relocate and support people. And as a geographer, you would have an understanding of cultural difference and how they can mitigate those differences and help support people as they transition into a new area. There are, in the U.S. and in other places in the world, the attitudes towards immigrants are typically not favorable, especially not right now. Immigrants are regarded with suspicion. They have different languages, different customs. They look different. And this is especially so when economic times are difficult. So people have the sense that immigrants are taking jobs. And this is even true within countries when you have internal migration, where people from Katrina or from Louisiana were moving into this area. There was a lot of just suspicion, and you see that also in country-to-country migration. So the relationship with the homeland for immigrants is not completely severed. Part of that is because of cell phone and internet connection, so it helps to maintain those ties. There's often return migration. Maybe the situation at home has changed and people return to families. Maybe the expectation wasn't as hoped and people return back home. And also there's often a financial connection where remittances are sent to support families, especially when the reason for migrating is financial. One of the negative effects for the immigrant country is the fact of brain drain, and often the most educated and the people with a lot of ability to give back to a community are the people that leave because they have the means to leave, and they are more readily accepted into a host country. So make sure this week, I'm going to scroll back to the top here, when you read the articles and when you watch the video, then you find your New York Times article, and I would start looking sooner than later. And then you really need to include these concepts and these terms. And so review the scoring sheet. Make sure you understand what the expectation is.